Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture, we'll be looking at biological molecules. When we are talking about biological molecules, we are referring to molecules that were made by cells or that were made by living organisms. So let us begin. In this lecture, these are the things that we will be looking at. We will be looking at macronutrients. The macronutrients include carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Then we will be looking at micronutrients. The micronutrients here refer to the minerals and the vitamins. We will also be looking at balanced diet and nutrient deficiency. Macronutrients. The prefix macro means large. So macronutrients are really the nutrients that are needed in large amount or large quantity. And these three nutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. We will briefly look at each one of those macromolecules. And the first of those macronutrients that we will be looking at would be carbohydrate. The simplest form of our carbohydrates, we call that monosaccharide. Generally, the structure of carbohydrates, the chemical structure is made up of carbon, we have hydrogen, and we have oxygen. Monosaccharide means single unit, a single unit of sugar, and we refer to them as simple sugars. Mono means one, and the saccharide, which is the root word where saccharide comes from, means sweet. So the simplest form of sugar, or the single unit of the sugar, is glucose. We have fructose, and we have galactose. So on the diagram on the right, as you can see, we have the three structures of the different forms of monosaccharides. The difference between the three of them is really the arrangement of the atom, because the chemical formula for each one of these monosaccharides is the same. The chemical formula being C6H12O6. All of them have the same chemical formula, but structurally they're different. Next we have disaccharide. The disaccharides, these are made up of two simple sugars joining together, and when they join together they form a complex sugar. Two examples of disaccharides are sucrose and maltose. The animation on the right here is giving us an idea how this process occurs. It's through a dehydration synthesis. So we have two simple sugar, and each one of them loses an atom. One of them loses a hydrogen, one of them loses an OH group, which forms water. So this forms here a water, and when they lose this OH and the H group, it causes the two monosaccharides to join together. Because this is not an advanced level course, we will not get into more details than this. So disaccharides, they are usually soluble in water, and the monosaccharides, they are also very soluble in water. And just like the monosaccharide, the disaccharides are also sweet in taste. Next, we have the polysaccharides. These are simple sugars that are joined together and they form long chains together. There might be a few sugars that are joined together, or it could be very long chains, and these chains can be thousands of simple sugars joining together. Examples of polysaccharides include cellulose, and the cellulose is found on cell wall of plants. So the structure of the cell wall consists of cellulose, which is a form of carbohydrates. We also have starch, which is a polysaccharide, and starch is found in plants. Starch is a storage molecule in plants. So when excess glucose is made during photosynthesis in plants, the plants will store the excess glucose as starch. We also have glycogen as an example of polysaccharide. Glycogen is the excess glucose that is stored in animals. For example, in our liver and in our muscle cells, the glucose is stored as glycogen. So these are all examples of polysaccharides. The animation here is showing us how they are joined together. The different monosaccharide units are joined together to form polysaccharides. Most of the polysaccharides, they are insoluble, meaning that they cannot dissolve in water. So if you add starch to water, you would find that the starch will not dissolve in water, and they do not have a sweet taste. So they have two main functions. They store energy. For example, the starch, it stores energy for the plant. So when the plant needs that energy later on, the starch will break down into monosaccharides, and it will be used for respiration. Similarly, in humans, we store our glycogen, and that glycogen will break down into glucose when we need that energy. And the polysaccharides also form structures in living organisms. For example, the cellulose form the cell wall that is found in plants. Some additional information here regarding carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are generally used to provide energy, and 1 gram of carbohydrates, if we consume 1 gram of the carbohydrate, it gives us 17 kilojoules of energy. As mentioned before, they form the structure of cell wall. Another polysaccharide is called chitin, and this forms the exoskeleton of insects. So these are very strong structures that are found in nature. The next macronutrient that we will look at now would be proteins. Proteins are organic compounds which are made up of small molecules called amino acids. So the smallest unit of the carbohydrate, we call that the monosaccharide. Example of monosaccharide was glucose. Similarly, in proteins, the simplest structure, we call that amino acids. And on the right hand side, we have a typical structure of an amino acid. Wherever you see the R is located, that's where different atoms are attached, and this will determine what type of amino acid this would be. There are 20 different types of amino acid. So it depends on the molecules, it depends on the atoms that are now attached to the R here, and that will determine the type of amino acid that we have. Some proteins are soluble. Examples of proteins that are soluble is hemoglobin. You should know why it is important for some proteins to be soluble. The hemoglobin, for example, transports oxygen. Some proteins are also insoluble. For example, keratin. And keratin is the protein that is found in our hair structure. In terms of the chemical structure, as you could also see on the diagram here, the atoms that protein consists of are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Some proteins also have sulfur. Long chains of proteins or long chains of amino acids, when the amino acids, which are the single unit, when they're joined together and form long chains, we call that polypeptide. Poly meaning many. So there are several different functions that protein have as compared to carbohydrates, and we will briefly look at some of the functions here. So one function here is that they assist in digestion. Examples of proteins that assist in digestion, we have the enzymes, the amylase, lipase, pepsin, and trypsin. These are enzymes, and enzymes are made of proteins. Then there are some proteins that help in transporting useful substances. For example, we have hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is important to transport oxygen in our body. The oxygen binds to the hemoglobin, and the oxygen is then transported to different parts of our body. Proteins also help in formation of our structure. For example, we have actin, we have tubulin, we have keratin, and these are all important for the structure of living organisms. Hormones are also made using proteins. For example, insulin and thyroxine. Proteins are also important in defending our body against pathogens. Proteins are important in movement. For example, we have actin and myosin. These are structures that are made using protein. And in some cases, the protein is used as storage. Next in the list of macronutrients, we have lipids. Lipids are organic compounds, meaning they are derived from living sources, and they include fats and oils. What is the difference between fats and oils? Fats are solids at room temperature, whereas oil, these are in liquid form at room temperature. So the chemical structure, or the atoms that the lipids consist of, would be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Lipids are generally insoluble in water, and they are made up of 4 molecules that are joined together. The 4 molecules are shown in a diagram here. We have 3 molecules of fatty acid. So we have 1 fatty acid, 2 fatty acids, 3 fatty acids, and then we have the glycerol. Function of fats, or functions of lipids. They can be used to release energy. 1 gram, if you consume 1 gram of fat, then it will provide 39 kilojoules of energy. And if you recall, for carbohydrates, if you consume 1 gram, it will provide 17 kilojoules of energy. The fats produce double or a little more than double the amount of energy that 1 gram of carbohydrate would provide. Some additional functions of lipids would be that they're used to make hormones, they're used to make cell membrane. As shown in the diagram here, the cell membrane is made using lipids. And fats also help to absorb vitamins. There are some vitamins that are fat soluble, so these fat soluble vitamins will be absorbed by the fats. Fats also help to insulate the body in different animals. This table is showing us the sources of the different macronutrients. So there are different sources that we can get carbohydrates from. These will include bread, potato, we have rice, yams, arrows. Sources of protein include meat, fish, eggs, milk, cheese. Your dairy products have a high source of proteins, and there are also the leguminous plants have a high amount of proteins. Fats, we can get fats from butter, oil, peanuts, avocado, and fat from the meat sources. We will now look at micronutrients. So we just concluded the section on macronutrients. Macronutrients are those nutrients that are needed in large quantities. So by now you should be able to determine that micronutrients are those nutrients that are needed in small quantities. So micronutrients are generally not a source of energy. They do not provide energy. Rather, they assist in a lot of chemical reactions that are very important for our body to continuously function. Micronutrients include vitamins and minerals, as I mentioned before. The micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals, as I mentioned before. They are essential to maintain proper health, and they are needed mostly in terms of milligrams. That's how we would measure the amount of micronutrients, or even micrograms per day. They are water soluble. We have water soluble vitamins, and water soluble vitamins are those that will dissolve in water, which includes vitamin B and vitamin C. We also have fat soluble vitamins, and the fat soluble vitamins are vitamin A, B, D, E, and K. There are several different minerals that our body would require in small amount to ensure that chemical processes are occurring effectively. So we will quickly go through the different vitamins, the functions, and the deficiency that they make. So vitamin A is important to help in our eyesight. The vitamin A is used to manufacture pigment in the rod cells of our eyes. The rod cells assist and help us to see in bright light, and it helps us to see the different and differentiate between the colors. Vitamin A is also important for healthy skin and also to maintain healthy mucous membrane. They also have a role in our immune system in that it helps to protect our immune system against diseases. The different sources of vitamin A include cheese, butter, leafy dark vegetables, and dark orange fruits. If we do not consume the recommended amount of vitamin A, then we could suffer from a deficiency disease, and this deficiency disease is called night blindness. So night blindness is basically when someone cannot see clearly in dim light or during the night. The next vitamin is vitamin B. There are different types of vitamin B. There are at least 12 different vitamin B. Generally, the function of vitamin B would be for metabolic activity. An example of metabolic activity would be respiration. They're also important in enzyme activities. Sources of vitamin B include legumes, milk products, meat, liver, and leafy vegetables. Deficiency of vitamin B leads to the condition called beriberi and tiredness. So what is beriberi? Beriberi is actually caused because of a deficiency of mainly vitamin B1 or thiamine. This vitamin is important for metabolism and digestion of our food. So if our food cannot be digested properly and it cannot be broken down properly, then we will not be able to have enough energy that we need. Hence, we will constantly feel very tired. So if you're feeling very tired very often, one possibility is that you probably need to have more vitamin B in your diet. Vitamin C. So the function of vitamin C is to maintain healthy skin and gum and generally connective tissues, or it helps in the formation of connective tissues. It also has a role in the health of our immune system. Oftentimes you would hear persons saying that if you are unwell, then you perhaps need to increase your intake of vitamin C. So the vitamin C actually helps the white blood cells to carry out their function more effectively. It helps the immune system cells to get rid of pathogens more effectively. Sources of vitamin C include fruits, and especially fresh fruits and vegetables, because the more fresh they are, the higher the amount of vitamin C that they will have. The deficiency of vitamin C would lead to the condition called scurvy. Some of the signs of scurvy is that the person will experience weakness, the person will experience anemia, bruising, bleeding gums, and loose teeth. Next, we have vitamin D, and the function of vitamin D is to help in the uptake of calcium and phosphorus. Sources of vitamin D include egg yolk, fatty fish, fortified milk, margarine, and exposure to sunlight. So about 10 to 15 minutes of exposure to sunlight is enough to provide the vitamin D that you would need. And how does this happen? How is it that the sunlight causes us to have vitamin D? The cholesterol that is found below the skin surface is converted into vitamin D. A deficiency of vitamin D leads to the condition called rickets. Rickets is where persons will have brittle bones, and we can understand this because the structure of our bones rely on calcium and phosphorus. And if we do not have enough vitamin D, then we cannot take in enough calcium and phosphorus, which will lead to our bones and our teeth not to develop properly. So in the diagram that we have here on the right, we have some additional function of vitamin D. Vitamin D also helps to promote cell growth. It helps to reduce inflammation. It can support neuromuscular function. Helps in our movement. And it may also help to prevent upper respiratory tract infections. So they help in our immune system as well. Next, we have vitamin E. Function of vitamin E is that they act as antioxidants. Antioxidants help to prevent damages that occur on our cells. On a daily basis, there are different chemical reactions that are happening, and damages are going to happen in our cells. And if these damages happen in an uncontrolled fashion, it could lead to the formation of cancer cells. So vitamin E is very important in our diet. But persons generally do not suffer from vitamin E deficiency because the food that we consume normally have enough vitamin E that we need in our diet. So they act as antioxidants. Sources include leafy vegetables, wheat, whole grain products, and so forth. A deficiency of vitamin E will lead to malabsorption of nutrients. Vitamin K, the final vitamin that we are looking at here, main function is to help in blood clotting. Whenever we have a cut in our skin, we start to bleed, and vitamin K is important to help stop the process that causes us to lose too much of blood. The main sources that we can get vitamin K from would include leafy vegetables, green leafy vegetables. A deficiency of vitamin K will therefore lead to poor blood clotting. Alright, to summarize what we have been looking at so far, we looked at macronutrients. And the macronutrients, we said, these are needed in large quantities. There are 3 macronutrients. One of them is carbohydrates. And we mentioned that the simplest of the carbohydrates would be monosaccharide. These are single units, example glucose. Then we have disaccharides, and these are formed by dehydration synthesis when 2 monosaccharides are joined together. And large chains of monosaccharides are called polysaccharides. An example of a polysaccharide would be cellulose. Another macronutrient that we looked at was protein. The simplest unit of the protein is called amino acids. Long chains of these amino acids, we call them polypeptides. We then look at lipids. Lipids are made of fatty acids. We have 3 fatty acids attached to a glycerol. Next, we look at micronutrients. As mentioned before, micronutrients are required in small quantities. You need small amount of these micronutrients. Micronutrients include vitamins, and we have fat-soluble vitamins. Can you recall the fat-soluble vitamins that we mentioned earlier in the lecture? And we have water-soluble vitamin, which would be the vitamin B and vitamin C.